You're very welcome to the Locker Room podcast. This is podcast number 64. We've got Ross Bennett here with myself, Ciaran Deely, both from DeelySportsScience.com. We're going to be speaking about designing the microcycle, which will be quite interesting. We'll be speaking about designing the microcycle, the training week, in other words, in professional football and also in the GA world. Just to mention first, head over to DeelySportsScience.com. We've got lots going on there for our members at the moment, online CPD. We've got a new beginner coach vlog series. We've just announced details of an offer for Performa Sports Analysis Suite with 10% off for DSS members also. And anybody who's looking to sign up at the moment, we actually are running an offer 40% off of Deely 40, so capital DEELY 40 for 40% off subscription, which will be ending very, very soon. So make sure you check out that DeelySportsScience.com. Ross, just first off, congrats on your new job with QPR first team, head of sports science. We won't speak, I suppose, particularly about QPR because that's your professional work that you're have to look after and hopefully get as many points as possible in the championship. But I'm sure we'll kind of dip into bits of your experience across different teams, different clubs and different setups. But anyway, congratulations again about your new position.
Thanks, Kears. You and many others are still congratulating me 3-4 months on, so it's very surreal. You got to remember, I've been at the club for over 9 years now. But no, I'm really enjoying it. It's obviously very different to the academy stuff, and it's been a little bit of shock to me in terms of the pressure and the cutting edge of things, and every point matters. But thoroughly enjoying it and working with a great staff. Great,
good stuff. Okay, this is a really interesting topic. We're going to have a slightly shorter podcast today, I think, because it's a nice little particular topic. We spent about half an hour speaking about it, the microcycle. And for anybody who doesn't know what microcycle is, it's just basically the training week, usually a week-long period. First of all, Ross, who designs the microcycle in your particular experience? And we might kind of chat about different setups and different clubs that we've been involved with.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think that the short answer is the manager or the head coach. You know, they're going to design the training week what they feel is best to prepare the team. Depending on the setup of where you're working, you might have a manager who oversees things and a head coach or someone who's on the grass doing most of the coaching that would take an interest and active role in designing that with the use of the MBT, which I'm sure we'll come on to. Or you might have a manager who's very hands-on and wants to coach and coaches 90% of the time. So essentially they're going to design the training week, but with the support of the coaching staff, the sports science staff, the medical team, you know, around certain individuals and the team as well.
Yeah. And how does that happen? Like in your experience, for instance, you've probably experienced a manager who has come in and kind of said, okay, look, this is the season plan or this is the macro cycle plan. There's probably we've both experienced coaches who will come in on day one and kind of in some ways nearly expected the plan to be in place from a physical development point of view from your S&C and sports scientists, or maybe, you know, from the academy director designs the kind of season plan or the macrocycle, the microcycle. What's the optimal way of that happening, I suppose?
I don't think there's an optimal way. I think that, like, essentially the managers there or whoever's in charge of the organization's there, so their job's on the line, like their head's on the block all the time for getting results or developing players or whatever capacity you're in. So they're going to design something they think's right for that training week or certain weeks across the season. And I think you have to think about, like, we always work backwards from the games. So your training week's always going to differ depending on the games you've got. Like even now we've got games on Tuesday night, obviously the Saturday, sometimes Wednesday night, sometimes Friday night. So there's not a set in stone week that you go by week by week. There's an ideal training week that we all kind of agree on and work towards, but you have to work backwards from the games. And also you have to have a little bit of flexibility in there for giving players a few days off if they do really well and a little bit of an incentive like that. So there's lots of things in the mix, but I would say, you know, the manager and coach will put out their ideal training week by week, and then it's down to the support staff to advise and either tweaking it or the content within it to make sure the players are ready and ready to perform.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think in the GA world at the moment, so much emphasis is being put on the S&C coach, and it's never the sports scientist. You don't hear about sports science. It's just the S&C coach. And I think a lot of coaches and managers really lean on the S&C coach now to kind of design out the training week and the macrocycle plans. Now, maybe the Gaelic games are a little bit different in that it's more physical based than skill based in terms of in comparison with professional football, and I think that makes a difference. But I still think that, you know, the best coaches, the best managers are the ones who will come along, and they have a really good, well, first of all, they have a really good understanding of physical loading, so they'll have knowledge in that area themselves, but also they've got an idea and a plan in their head. And like you say, the physical loading then can kind of fit around that, can wrap around that program. But it doesn't always happen in the GA world, I think.
No, I think that the GA world will probably come away from that slightly. I don't think the S&C coach should be designing like the whole week. Yes, the physical loading is really important, and it might take time for certain coaches and managers to upskill and understand that. But I think if the S&C is designing the whole training week, I think you're definitely missing certain things within the week. So the best coaches I've worked with, and I've worked with loads, and obviously the current manager now is excellent in terms of the periodization and how the loading fits into it. But then it's about the support staff then saying, okay, this is what you want from your team at the weekend, because there's lots of different things that fit into that. What happened the last game? Like, how are you going to rectify certain things you saw from the last game? How are you going to prepare for the next team? What sort of style are you going to play? Are you going to change your formation? So there's so many things that fit into it. The physical loading is really important to prepare them, but you have to take that in consideration of everything else.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about the game, because when I was manager of the London senior football team, like every week you kind of work off the game. Like, first of all, the scheduling of it. So whether we were flying back to Ireland to play a game or we had a game at home in London, first of all, the scheduling, but you could never plan too far in advance about the actual content of the sessions, because it really does matter. If you get absolutely cleaned out in midfield on kickouts in the previous game, obviously the first thing you're probably going to work on then on Tuesday night or Wednesday night is, you know, kickouts in the center of the park. So the game really does dictate, and also like the tactical information in preparation for the next game obviously is going to be number one, you know, probably more than the physical loading.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where the sport, I call them sports scientists. I don't really call people S&Cs. You know, I think good sports scientist is very well accomplished in S&C, also understanding like monitoring and pitch loading. So, but that's where the context comes into it for sports scientists. So if your first night due back, let's just talk about Gaelic now, is meant to be a real high load physical session, and everything, you know, you've got a 90-minute session where everything is foot to the floor to the max, but you need to work 20 minutes on kickouts. Well, the intensity is going to come down a little bit there, but that's okay, because what do the team need to get better for the weekend? So that's where you work your physical parameters, your intensity around the session, and you discuss things.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, it can be a little bit different in academy, obviously, and in youth development, whereby you can nearly, and we've spoken about this before on other podcast episodes, where you can set out a kind of a curriculum across the season and specific things that you're going to work on at specific times of the season, and also at specific points of like a 6-week phase or macro cycle. Let's say, you know, you might be more focusing on defending, attacking, transitioning, or you know, we have it slightly different in QPR about the different practices, you know, the stock practices that we focus on. But can you do that in adult, in first team level then?
I think you can, but I think it depends on what the players need. And same for the youth teams. You know, when I was coaching the 16s, you would have stock practices that were scheduled in for the next 6 weeks. But if, for example, we were getting beat over the top, our back four, they weren't tracking runners, or their line was too high, or they didn't read the trigger when someone went to go long, then you have to work on that. So within your stock practice, that has to be the focus, because if you just neglect that for 3-4 weeks and things don't improve, ultimately then players are going to fail. So I think there has to be flexibility within the long-term plan to be able to give the players what they need. They might be fairly good at attacking in the final third, and you might have that on the agenda, but they might need something slightly different, switching play in possession or breaking lines or whatever it is. So you just tweak accordingly what you're going to do at academy level. But at first team level, it's all about improving the team. What do they need now for the next game to go and perform and get 3 points?
Yeah, no, really interesting. Just while we're on the tactical stuff, we might as well touch on it now before going into the speaking about what's actually involved in the in-season microcycle. When I was working in the GA, in general, I would say if we had 2 pitch sessions during the week after a game and then in preparation for the next game, in general, I would have worked higher load on for us, it was a Wednesday night, which we'll speak about in a minute, but the first session of the week, I would focus more on our defense and how we're going to set up and everything like that. Phases of play, more small-sided games, etc. More contact. But then on the second session, then whether that's the Thursday night or the Friday night, the last session before the next game, I nearly always focused on us, on our attack. And so that was like phases of play, scoring, 2v1s, 3v2s, 5v3s, work like that, where players are getting success and you're kind of telling the players earlier in the week, okay, this is what the opposition team are doing. Here's how we're setting up defensively against that. But on the last session, then here's how we're actually going to win the game. Here's how we're going to exploit their weaknesses. I'm interested, how does it work at first team level in professional soccer or even in academy level? Is it different?
Yeah, well, I think doing the direct comparison with the first team stuff is that you've got more time to work with players. So you've got to think in the game, you've got 2 sessions to prepare your team, essentially. It's on a part-time model. I think that if you utilize your coaches well, you can affect both in possession, out possession in the same session. So, there's a lot of stuff and a lot of clubs are doing things like unit practices now. So you might have your team set up across the week about how we're going to, as a team, stop this team from playing. But I think you have to really focus on how you're going to affect them, how you're going to really put your game plan on there. So that can be drip fed throughout the whole week. I don't think that has to be split through different sessions, but you can work on your units and then bring them together and work on them at the same time. So if you've got a coach working on the back 4 and whatever their strategy is, or the back 3 or back 5, whatever you're playing, and you've got a coach working with the midfielders, and then you've got a coach working with the front line, looking at movement in behind and combinations, when you go into a phase of play, all those coaches are still coaching those specific units. So everybody's getting effect throughout the week. So I think it's down to resource. It's down to having good quality staff who can manage those units and get the coaching points across. But I think the most positive thing on the Thursday, Friday, how we're going to win the game, how we're going to take the game to them is obviously the most important thing. Otherwise, you play in fear and you constantly worry about the other team. And that's where the analysis has to be very, very clever. But you have to do analysis on the opposition, but you don't want to overload the players and instill fear on them. But at the same time, this is where we can exploit. This is where the weaknesses are. We're good here. Let's be really strong. Yeah,
I think that's interesting, because if you use the analysis to kind of pinpoint areas of weaknesses in the opposition, areas that we can exploit, that's how we go and win the game. Obviously, you want to also, identify their strengths, and you're thinking, well, how do we nullify or dampen those strengths? That's important. But I mean, from listening to different Eddie Jones and people like that with the England rugby team, where he speaks about analysis sessions should never be more than 10-minute, maximum 15-minute bite size. Get the players involved, which we did a lot, when we were involved with London GA and everything. I think that's the way to go, rather than long, dull, boring kind of analysis sessions.
Yeah, I mean, just in recent experiences, we've seen analysis sessions 3 or 4 times a week, but 10-15 minutes before training, and then also more interaction from players on different pages, on different platforms that you can use. We used Huddle at London, where players can interact and talk about not only their own game, but the team game plan as well. So the more bite-sized stuff you get and the more interaction you get from players, the more they're going to buy into the process and aid learning. It's just to aid the stuff you're doing onto the pitch, really.
Yeah. Do you think it's heading more in that direction, where you have position-specific coaches, or just from day to day, that the coach who's looking after defenders maybe on another day will look after the attackers? How does it work?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be like, and I'm seeing it not only at our place but also across across the country now, where you've got a coach who's in charge, a lieutenant in charge of the back line, a coach that specialises in the midfield, a coach who specialises in the front line, and then the manager who oversees the whole pie, and also set pieces as well. That's becoming a big thing. So I think those specific like coaching lieutenants, as long as we get the personnel right and the quality there and the trust between the manager getting the message across to those units, I think that's the way forward. And it's something that we always championed at London, the unit work, from 6-7 years ago when it wasn't really a big thing. I think it's essential because you can affect people in different units in team practices, but you can't necessarily coach the detail all the time. And you have to go back to the lab and give these players like every bit of detail to succeed in the game.
No, I agree. Okay, just jumping in then to the actual in-season weekly microcycle, like the model. I suppose in Gaelic, from our experience, what we previously did, like you say, it's a good way of saying it, actually. It's a part-time kind of model whereby you'll have game at the weekend, 2 pitch sessions during the week, and then usually 2 gym sessions or maybe 1. We did for years as a player with Rexford. We would have trained on the pitch Tuesday and Thursday nights, match on a Sunday, and gym sessions would be Monday and Wednesday, with Friday, Saturday off, let's say. I know other teams would probably train, they do something on the Saturday as well, maybe set pieces and your setup and everything. I know lots of club teams, for instance, in the GA world would do where, again, 2 pitch sessions, and that would be a Tuesday and a Friday. And like, that's where just purely the logistics come into it, where guys are, heading home from Dublin or wherever they're working on a Friday evening. So it means that they can train on the Friday evening and then match on the Sunday. It may not be the optimal way, but it's kind of with the constraints of it. I'll come back to what we did then at different times, but it's obviously very, very different then when you're coming to a professional setup, whether that's football or, basketball, rugby, whatever it is, where you have so much access to these players. So essentially you've got a blank sheet of paper to kind of design what you want, really, within the constraints of the games.
Yeah, of course. Just first of all, on the Gaelic stuff, like I always push to you as well. I know culturally it's very different, but I think they should be training 3 times a week. I think that definitely with the county teams, because it's so hard to fluctuate the physical loading across 2 pitch sessions when you have to get your work in and set your team up. So we talk about intensive, extensive and stuff like that, but that kind of goes out the window a little bit on a Thursday or Friday night when you have to go through phases of play and set your team up for the weekend. So when we did the monitoring, players were covering quite a bit of high-speed running leading into a game, which they got used to. And I'm not saying it's an issue, and we're there to push the players as well. But I think if you had 3 sessions across the week, you'd be able to be a lot cleverer with unit work, a lot lower intensity stuff, and fluctuate the load a bit more. And then you're bridging the gap to the full-time model.
And it is really interesting, actually, because generally the games are on a Sunday, obviously, in GA. Normally teams will train on a Tuesday. So for instance, you train on a Tuesday and maybe a Thursday and then something at the week, match again at the weekend. But like Tuesday then is match day +2. So it's like 48 hours or a little bit more maybe after the game. You're probably going to, you probably want to have your high load session earlier in the week, far away from the next game. But that means then that you're, like in my career with Wexford, Tuesday night is your hard night, but it's 48 hours after the previous game. When you think about it, I look back now and go, wow, we were being pushed hard 2 days after we played a full National League game, which is madness. Now, not always. We often got kind of recovery and stuff, but I remember other times we had recovery sessions where you just do the first half hour or 45 minutes. But then that means that you're not training properly actually until maybe Thursday night, or even Friday night, one session leading into the next game then.
Yeah, I think looking at it now, you definitely should do something on the Tuesday, but obviously it's a lighter session, but that's where you can differentiate between the ones who played a lot of the game and the ones that didn't on the Tuesday night. And then you have a Wednesday night session. So the Tuesday night session sets you up for Wednesday, and Wednesday's which was the day we had on +3. But, apart from a gym session, players didn't do anything until the Wednesday. So physically, are they in the best shape to come and train that hard on the Wednesday? Probably not in an ideal scenario. Then you get your hard session on Wednesday interspersed with the stuff that you want to work on for the weekend. And then it's a decision then, where does your gym program fit into it? Maybe a Thursday night with, I would say, Friday off, and you train light Saturday before the game. So I know that's culturally not done previously in Gaelic. We did it a couple of times, and I don't think we had any adverse effects. But you just have to think that players only perform to what they're used to. So any new stimulus that comes in, it's going to be a shock to the system, and something could go wrong. Don't get me wrong. But once they get used to a certain training schedule, that the body adapts, and the body's used to that. So ideally, I would go pitch sessions Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday morning, if you can, without travel. If you travel Saturday, travel after. Play Sunday, you've got Monday to fully recover. Tuesday, you have a light session for the starters. The non-starters can do some more. Wednesday, you give everyone a good hit of a hard session, and then you bring it right down Saturday. So you split that kind of you split that second session over 2 smaller sessions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I wonder, could you even get to the stage where the starters on a Sunday could have Tuesday off? So instead of them traveling to do a recovery session, maybe they stay at home and they recover.
Maybe. But then
the dynamic of the group,
Yeah, of course. Then I think you might say, okay, well then we're going to do Tuesday for non-starters, Wednesday and Friday for the starters, because they need to get 2 good sessions in. Saturday before the game's going to be very light. So that's where your schedule needs to be flexible. And then obviously your gym program in there. Ideally, after a gym session, you'd probably like a day off if you're doing 1 gym session. So all these things go into the mix. Huh?
It's really interesting. I mean, in fairness, you can do a Tuesday session where you do your analysis, you do your, kind of maybe a nutritional talk, and maybe whatever it is, the starters can have their recovery, maybe a tiny bit on the pitch. The other guys, then non-starters, like you work them harder, and then in preparation for the next day. But I agree 100% in that it's getting those guys used to it, because in GA, we're not used to actually training 2 days in a row or training the day before the game often. So it's just kind of cultural change like that. But it's really interesting. I could see that kind of thing coming in more as things get more and more like professional. And you're trying to identify what's the ideal schedule for the starters and the non-starters. Okay, we'll jump in because we haven't got that. We'll go down rabbit holes. Okay, so just like, what's in your mind, what's the optimal, even though it's hard to know what is the optimal, or what's the typical then?
Yeah, interesting. There's kind of 2 schools of thought, really. And I think everything kind of is now derived on this tactical periodization that kind of came out from a European model many, many years ago. And a lot of top coaches have taken that on board, and essentially just like a manipulation of space and intensity throughout the week, without going into like the terms that they have. I don't think that's too relevant. But essentially, there's the traditional model that would have a Wednesday off, so middle of the week day off. So you train Monday, Tuesday, train Thursday, Friday, lead into a game Saturday if you just got a 1 game a week. Now, typically then on the Monday, like we just spoke about there, the starters match day +2 would come out, do something on the pitch. Some clubs have the starters on the match day +2 indoors completely. I think it's good for them to get outside, get a little bit of technical work, maybe do some unit work, 45 minutes, very, very light, a couple of K, and then they can go in and get their soft tissue and do whatever recovery stuff that they need to do, and get good food on, nutrition, etc. And then the non-starters can actually train fairly hard. So with the non-starters, you actually front load the week. So Monday, they'll probably do more of an intensive session. So because the numbers are going to be 10 to 12 left at half the squad, you'd probably do a lot of 6v6s, different possession games. And intensively, they would work quite hard. So axel details would be quite high, etc., etc. That would then lead nicely onto the Tuesday, where that's your hardest session of the week. So people talk about having like this extensive, intensive split. I think we need to just simplify things and just say, right, Tuesday needs to be your hardest session of the week.
Yeah.
I love large-sided games. I think Tuesday is perfect for 11v11s, but it doesn't always have to be 11v11. You can do lots of different practices based on your game plan, whether that be a phase of play, counter-attack running, defending the space in behind. But then also, put some intense small-sided games on there. So you get a little bit of a mix of big spaces and small spaces on the Tuesday. But that's your day to really work the players.
Yeah. That's where people now are, the phraseology is like a blended session. it's like a mix of intensive and extensive. And maybe it goes back again to what we said there about, well, what do the players actually need for that week or for that session? It might be a mix of both. It might be more focused on defending. It might be more focused on in possession. It's whatever you need that specific day and week.
100%, but I think you have to, like, from a physical perspective, go by certain principles. So if you want to get certain things, for example, including the match at the weekend, we want to get 2 game loads. So a game load throughout the week of high-speed running, ideally on the Tuesday. So you're giving them 100% of match load high-speed running on the Tuesday, but also you're giving them quite a high game load of axial decel. So that session's quite packed. But you're right, it depends on where you are in the week and what they've had previously and certain tweaks you can make to it. Then they would typically do some sort of gym session on the Tuesday, so like a maintenance gym program, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday off, so recovery. I like, from a psychological perspective, and even personally, having Wednesday off in the week. I think it refreshes the mind. You're only in for 2 days. You have a real hard session on the Tuesday for players and staff. You put a lot of effort into that. You get Wednesday off. Thursday you come back in, and Thursday you take things down. So you think the Monday has been really high load for the non-starters. Tuesday's been high load for everybody. Thursday, then you start working at like half of game load. There's going to be some extensive in there, but you try to minimize the extensive work. The axial decels, the volume of that, you try to minimize that, and you start preparing and tapering for the weekend. So Thursday's like 50% of game. Friday then is approximately 30%. So you're looking at like 3K. But interestingly, and something that, recently I've, been lucky to witness, is that those that aren't starting on the weekend, they can do a little bit extra on the Friday as well, because unless someone gets badly injured, I'm not saying you train them like hard, but an extra K of small-sided games, they're probably only going to come on for 30 minutes. So the Monday session, the Friday session extra, the Tuesday hard session, they're getting bits of work throughout the week. So know when a player's called upon, they're ready. They've not been forgot about for 3 or 4 weeks.
How do you find that with the non-start? Like, so the guy who knows he's going to be in the squad on the bench and knows that he could potentially, come on in the first half if there's an injury or whatever, but more likely to get half an hour, let's say, do they mind doing extra on a Friday? Are they happy, to stay sharp and keep their fitness up?
I think as long as it's done in the right volume, so they would only still go up to like 4K, which when we was working in
low.
Everyone would probably do 4K on a match one, so it's still low. And they're getting specific work, with 10, 12 players. The fullbacks are getting RPs, they might do some crossing and finishing. The fullbacks are getting some crossing. The frontline players are getting some proper finishing work. It might be a little bout of small-sided games. So it's very, very minimal work. It's not hard work on the Friday, but I think they like it because they know they're being cared for and their long-term development and is being looked after as well.
How do you find about if you push those so in other words, you're dipping in small bits of extra work throughout the week rather than going, right, we're going to blast them on a Monday, a match day +2, and that's where they make up the work. How do they find then do that extra little bit of work on a Monday, which is match day +2, and then again having a very high load on a Tuesday?
Yeah, it's interesting because, the sports scientist in us would say, let's keep Monday fairly low and prepare them for Tuesday. But when you're looking to really push performance and make sure those non-starters are maintaining high fitness level, because the match gives you a lot of load that's hard to actually try and replicate. So they actually end up covering 5-6K on the Monday and then another 7-8K on the Tuesday. So their front load of the week is really heavy. But then the Thursday you come off them more. So their Thursday is probably a bit of a taper for them, and then the Friday they do a small dose of extra work, and then the Saturday, depending on minutes they get, plus any extra running, just to from a high-speed running or axial decel perspective. So I think culturally it takes a bit of time to get there, but it's been really well received, and it really does bridge that gap between the starters and the non-starters to make sure they're ready. And
it's a big challenge, isn't it? Because, even mentally, if those guys feel like they're being left out of the whole kind of setup, it can cause issues within a whole group and the dynamic, and also obviously they're not prepared then to come into a game and perform, so it makes it difficult.
Just on top of that, before I go on to the other model, it's important that if there's regular people not starting, so obviously there's going to be certain rotations. There might be 15, 16 players that are rotated regularly and depend on little injuries and stuff. But if there's like 5 or 6 players that aren't playing regularly and they're only on the bench, it's important, we said it before, that you get games in for them, like every 3 or 4 weeks with our B team or the 23s, or if you're in a senior setup, can you get a friendly and you drop some junior players in, or whatever it is, just to make, or the reserves, just to make sure that they do play, you know, a game every so often, because you can't replicate that game. You can't, as much training as you do, you still need to give them game exposure.
Yeah, so even like an 11v11 on a Tuesday, for instance, against your B team, reserve team, under 23s, whatever, is advisable in that situation.
Yeah, and it's important that even if they play with, like, you set up a resi game and you play them for 60 to 70 minutes, because like you could do a 40-minute in-house game, but it's only a 40-minute in-house game. So if you want someone to be able to play for 60 minutes plus, you have to expose them to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Very briefly then, those non-starters, are they hitting more or less, you know, comparable weekly loads? And also, what about immediately post-game? You know, home games and away games.
Yeah, so with that extra training and with the post running we do, you know, after the game, which is a mixture of extensive stuff and trying to get up to some top speed stuff and some like shuttle based work for actual B cells. Like their intensive and extensive markers are normally very comparable with the starters, sometimes if not a little bit higher. But the one thing that is hard to get them up to is the distance. So if someone's, you know, got a clear training week and they play a full 90 at the weekend, they might get to 32, 34K. A non-starter might get to 26 to 28, but their other metrics are they're as high. So it is something to look at, and there are windows of opportunity where you can give them some longer aerobic work to keep that base going.
I was going to say,
that load is important over time, and that's your job as a sports scientist then, to really look at those loads over time and say, okay, what do the players need, and how are we going to get there? How are we going to keep them at good physical condition, really? Yeah,
I suppose that long, slow distance as well, maybe in international windows or little particular windows where you can kind of get an extra little bit of work into them when the starters are more focused on recovery, for instance, is possible as well. Okay, just then moving on quickly to, well, the other model, I suppose, which is more a European model, where you're bringing in the players more throughout the week and on slightly different days.
Yeah, there's a model that keeps the same amount of days coming in. So some people would like work up until like Wednesday. So Monday kind of recovery session, Tuesday, Wednesday. So Tuesday and Wednesday being your harder sessions, have Thursday off. And that's where people tend to do an intensive, extensive or extensive, intensive split. And then Thursday off, and then really so tapering down for Friday really light. Now, from a physical perspective, it looks really nice on paper, and it, you know, you have your recovery session. I personally would do extensive on the Tuesday and intensive Wednesday, but some people flip it around. But I just think from a coaching perspective, Thursday is a key day to really hone in on your game plan. And like, not many managers want to have that -2 off the pitch, because focus is on now. We've got 48 hours. We can actually get a little bit of work into you and work on our game plan on Thursday. Friday, we concrete and cement some of that learning on how we're going to win the game. So you have 2 clear training days going into the game. So I'm still in the mindset that I like the Wednesday off. Obviously, at top clubs, some of them go all the way through and just have 1 day a week off. So they might come in for Monday and just do active recovery in the gym. They train then a 4-day lead in. Tuesday a little bit lighter. Wednesday a hard day. Taper Thursday, Friday.
Sorry, Ross. If a match is on Saturday, they come in on the Monday for recovery, and then
or they come in for Sunday for recovery.
Sunday. Sorry. In on Sunday for recovery, and then they potentially have Monday off, and then they go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday leading
all the way through. Or you have Sunday off and you come in for Monday for recovery and Tuesday onwards. But then the non-starters will probably go 5 days training into a game. So, but again, it's what you're used to, and a lot of like top Premiership clubs have been doing that, so their bodies are arguably able to do that, and you're pushing the boundaries a little bit. So there's different models there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I do have to agree as regards, I like the players and the staff having the match day +1, the Sunday off, just to be with their families, psychological downtime. And if you're doing enough work throughout the week and enough coaching, having that Wednesday day where you can, again, spend time with your family, go and do your shopping, go and, you know, whatever other interests you have in your life, and kind of unwind a little bit and recover from a tough session on the Tuesday, you're ready then and fresh and ready to go at it again on the Thursday. So actually the traditional model kind of suits. Just briefly then, Ross, we've kind of touched on we have touched on the starters and non-starters, the multi-game week. So if you're playing on a Tuesday, a Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday.
Yeah, that becomes quite hard then. The schedule becomes quite relentless then, really, because essentially if you play Saturday and you've got a game Tuesday, everyone comes in Sunday. So, you know, because you've got to see what's happened in the game, there might be a couple of players that felt something that might need to come and be assessed, and you need to see where your squad's at basically ahead of going into Tuesday. So not all the time. Some clubs would give Sunday off, especially at certain times in the season, but more often than not, after a Saturday game, you'd come in Sunday. The starters then would be indoors, or something we've done very recently. We took them out for a walk, for like a 15-20 minute walk, especially when things have been going quite well. It's quite nice from a social perspective for starters to go out, and we will have a little stroll around. Then you go inside and do your active recovery, and you throw everything at them really in a multi-game league. Yeah. Aside from a lot of, and I know a lot of research is still coming out about cold water immersion and how, you know, it might blunt adaptation, and it's actually not the best thing to do. But I think in multi-game weeks, you got to think everything we chuck at these players, you have to chuck at them, because you have to do everything you can to make sure the players physiologically and psychologically ready to perform again on Tuesday. So
I mean, you're not worried about adaptations and all there, aren't you? Not. You're just thinking of getting that player ready for the next game. So you're kind of throwing the kitchen sink at them, you know, giving them whatever they need. Yeah.
And look, we all know that sleep, nutrition, hydration are the most biggest pillars for recovery. We know that's something that you're advocating to the team all the time. But all those other little things, soft tissue massage, active recovery, so like stretching, ice baths, they're only going to help psychologically as well as physically. They're not going to harm in a multi-game week. So why would you not do it? And then Sunday then, so as they're doing their recovery, you'd have the training group for the non-starters like you would on the Monday. And then the Monday that week would become a match day -1. So preparing the team for the game on Tuesday. Then you'd get a day off on the Wednesday, and you then assess again, so match day +2. So depending on where your squad are at and how physically they've exerted will depend on what the starters from Tuesday night do on the Thursday. So have they played Saturday, Tuesday, 90-90? Do you want to keep them inside, or do you want to take them out and do some light active work, or do you want to train a little bit? So there's options there, and you have to be a little bit flexible in the schedule. And then you go back into the Friday match day -1. So there's so many of those in the championship, you don't actually get time to train your players. Like your main players, you're literally just recovering, giving them good info, game plan, review the last game, look ahead, let's prepare for the next game. It's the non-starters that get the most training and the most input. So when you get a free week to train, it's amazing, because you can really start to develop the players, not only physically, but their understanding, certain tactical stuff. You can put more load into them. Yeah.
Okay. Really interesting. Okay, Ross, we leave it at that. I think that's really fascinating kind of insight into professional sport, and also, you know, having a look at the GA part-time model as well, the amateur model. Really, really good information there. So thank you very much. Okay, thanks to everybody for listening. Remember, head over to deelysportscience.com and you can see all our services there. And remember, use the coupon code DEELY40 for 40% off membership. That's DEELY, all caps, 40 for 40% off. Ross, thank you very much, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers, kids.